eyes that seemed far too calm for someone about to face a Scorvath. "The creature has entered Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Thex, his optical stalk swiveling between the displays. "Contestant designated as Beatrice Almeida, human female, originating from Sol 3 solar system." "Beatrice," Raoul repeated, tasting the alien sounds. "What sort of name is that?" "Our database indicates it originates from indigenous territories on their home world," Thex replied, scanning the information packets. "It means Voyager in one of their ancient languages." Raoul's laugh was a chittering sound that made the other officers in the observation chamber pause. How fitting. Her parents clearly foresaw her traveling so far to die on a hunting moon. The feed showed Beatrice moving through the twisted metal canyons of Sector 7 with careful, measured steps. She wore minimal armor, just some sort of flexible material that looked more suited for a mild climate than for combat. Her only visible weapons were a long knife strapped to her thigh and what appeared to be a primitive projectile launcher holstered at her hip. "Is that it?" Raoul asked, leaning closer to the screen. "Where are her plasma rifles, her sonic disruptors, her molecular destabilizers?" "Humans have access to advanced technology, Commander," Thex confirmed, pulling up trade records. "Their military utilizes particle beam weapons, gravitational anchors, and adaptive camouflage systems. This appears to be a choice." "A choice," Raoul echoed, "to die foolishly instead of merely dying." On the screen, Beatrice paused at a crossroads. The labyrinth of the hunting ground stretched in 4 directions, each path designed to funnel prey towards predetermined killing zones. The walls were 9 meters high, scarred by centuries of claw marks, acid burns, and impact damage from desperate last stands. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening. "What on earth is she doing?" Raoul muttered. Beatrice crouched, pressing the palm of her hand against the metal floor. She held the position for nearly 15 seconds before standing and choosing the left-hand passage, without hesitation. "She is moving towards Sector 9, Thex observed. "That will take her directly into the Scorvath's primary territory." "She is moving towards it." Raoul's antenna twitched. "Does she not grasp the concept of survival? Perhaps human prey instincts are defective." "Or perhaps," came a new voice from the chamber entrance, "she is not prey at all." Raoul turned to see Ambassador Kellix entering, her iridescent scales catching the harsh overhead lighting. The diplomat from the Zinthari Collective moved with grace, her reputation for interpreting the psychology of species almost as fearsome as her people's naval fleet. "Ambassador," Raoul acknowledged with a respectful dip of his head, "I was not aware you had an interest in the hunts." "I have an interest in humans," Kellix replied, moving to stand beside him at the observation window. "They are unusual." "They are weak," Raoul countered. "Look at her. No natural defenses. Skin that tears from simple impacts. Bones that fracture under modest pressure. They die from temperature variations that most species find only mildly uncomfortable." "And yet," Kellix said quietly, "they are everywhere. In 300 cycles, they have spread from one system to 17. Their trade networks rival those of the Korani Empire. Their diplomatic corps has negotiated peace between species that were at war for millennia. Their cultural exports dominate the entertainment matrices across 40 sectors." "Cultural exports do not defeat a Scorvath." "No," Kellix agreed. "But humans have defeated things worse than Scorvaths." Raoul wanted to argue, but movement on the screens caught his attention. Beatrice had entered Sector 9, and the environmental sensors lit up with activity. The Scorvath was on the move. "Here we go," Thex breathed. The Scorvath was magnificent in the way that natural disasters are magnificent. Almost 4 meters of scaled muscle, 6 limbs ending in claws that could shear through the hull of a starship, a jaw that could snap battle droids in half, and eyes that registered thermal, electromagnetic, and psionic signatures simultaneously. It had killed 43 challengers over its 15-cycle career in the arena. Its hide bore the scars of weapons that would have atomized lesser creatures. The beast emerged from a side passage 30 meters ahead of Beatrice. Its breathing sounded like industrial machinery grinding rock to dust. Beatrice stopped walking. She did not run, did not raise her weapon, did not even shift into a defensive stance. She simply stood there, hands loose at her sides, and stared at the Scorvath. "What is she doing?" Ral demanded. "Move, you stupid creature!" The Scorvath tilted its massive head, clearly as confused as the observers. Prey ran. That was the fundamental law of the hunt. Prey fled, and predators pursued, and the natural order was maintained through simple, brutal mathematics. Beatrice was not running. Instead, she smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Ral had seen enough human entertainment media to recognize the difference between their genuine smiles and this thing she was doing with her face. Her lips curved upward, but her eyes remained cold, calculating, and utterly fearless. "Oh," Kellex whispered. "Oh no." The Scorvath charged. 15 tons of predatory fury accelerated to 40 km/h in less than 3 seconds, closing the distance with the inevitability of a collapsing star. Its roar shook dust from the arena walls, its claws sparking against the metal floor. Beatrice moved at the last possible microsecond, her body dropping and rolling sideways with a fluid economy of motion. The Scorvath's swipe missed by centimeters, its momentum carrying it past her position. She came up running, not away from the beast, but parallel to it, her hand grabbing something from her belt. "Is that a net?" Thex sounded offended. She brought a net to fight a Scorvath. But Beatrice was not trying to capture the beast. She flung the weighted net not at the Scorvath, but at its front right leg, entangling it in the joint between its knee and ankle. The creature stumbled, not enough to fall, but enough to disrupt its turning radius. Those 2 seconds of disruption were enough. Beatrice planted a device against the wall as she ran past, her fingers moving too fast for the cameras to track properly. Then she was around the corner, disappearing into an access tunnel too narrow for the Scorvath to follow directly. The beast roared in frustration, backing up to take an alternative route. The moment it moved away from that section of wall, the device Beatrice had planted emitted a sharp, piercing tone. The Scorvath flinched, its sensitive auditory organs recoiling from the frequency. "Clever," Ral admitted, "but ultimately pointless. She is merely delaying the inevitable." "Is she?" asked Kellex. The hunt continued for another 20 minutes, and with each passing minute, Ral's certainty began to crack. Beatrice was not fighting like prey. She was not even fighting like a warrior trying to defeat a superior opponent. She was fighting like someone conducting an experiment, testing variables, gathering data. She would emerge from cover, provoke an attack, evade it by the smallest necessary margin, and then disappear again. She placed small devices throughout the sector, each one apparently designed to create sounds, lights, or vibrations that irritated the Scorvath's senses without causing any real harm. "She is mapping its responses," Kellex observed. "Look at the pattern. She attacks from the left, gauges reaction time. She uses the sonic device, measures sensory tolerance. She allows it to get close, evaluates strike patterns." "To what end?" Ral demanded. "She cannot harm it with that primitive weapon." As if in response to his words, Beatrice made her next move. She had led the Scorvath into Sector 12, an area with a partially collapsed ceiling that created unusual sightlines and acoustic properties. The beast was breathing harder, now frustrated by this prolonged chase. Its kind were ambush predators, built for explosive power rather than endurance. Beatrice, in contrast, looked barely winded. She stood in the center of an open area, visible from multiple angles, and once again, she did not run. She pulled her projectile launcher from its holster, aimed it at the ground near her feet, and fired. The sound was laughably quiet compared to the Scorvath's roars. A small crack, like wood snapping. The projectile embedded itself in the metal floor, trailing a thin wire. "What is that?" asked Thex. Beatrice fired again and again, 6 shots, each one connected by that thin wire, forming a rough circle around herself. Then she holstered the weapon, pulled out her knife, and waited. The Scorvath charged, done with games, ready to end this annoying prey once and for all. Its massive form thundered across the open ground, claws extended, jaws open wide enough to swallow Beatrice whole. She counted down under her breath. Ral could see her lips moving, though the audio pickups could not capture the words over the Scorvath's approach. 3, 2, 1. Beatrice dropped flat to the floor. The Scorvath's front legs crossed the circle formed by those wires, and the entire section of floor exploded. Not with chemical fire or plasma energy, but with something far more primitive, and in that moment, far more effective. The projectiles Beatrice had fired were not bullets. They were anchors for shaped charges, old-fashioned explosives carefully measured to direct their force downwards, peeling away the already weakened floor plating, and opening a 4.5-meter pit directly beneath the Skorvath's charging mass. The beast had one moment of almost comical surprise before physics and gravity took over. It fell, its roar changing pitch from rage to confusion, crashing into the maintenance level below with a thunderous impact that registered on seismic sensors across the entire facility. Beatrice stood up, brushed the dust from her legs, and looked down into the pit. The Skorvath was not dead. Its armor-plated hide had protected it from the fall, though one of its legs was bent at an angle that suggested significant damage. It thrashed in the confined space, trying to find purchase to climb back up. Its roars were now tinged with something that might have been pain. Beatrice pulled a small device from her belt. Not a weapon, a communications unit. "This is contestant Beatrice Almeida," she said calmly, her voice now crystal clear through the observation chamber's speakers. "I'm requesting immediate medical assistance for my opponent. It has sustained injuries that require veterinary intervention. I'm not proceeding with the kill." Silence filled the observation chamber. "She's asking for mercy." Thex's voice cracked on the last word. "For a Skorvath." "She won," Kellic said softly, "and now she is choosing not to kill it." Ral's mandibles worked soundlessly for several seconds before he found words. "The rules state that victory requires the elimination of the opponent. Death is not merely expected, it is required." On the screen, Beatrice looked up directly at the camera, as if she could see through the feeds to the observers beyond. Her expression was not triumphant. It was not even particularly emotional. It was simply decided. "Then I suppose your rules need updating," she said. "Because where I come from, proving you can kill something and actually killing it are two different achievements. I have proven I can defeat this creature. What I do next is my choice, not yours." She sat down at the edge of the pit, her legs dangling over the side, apparently content to wait for the medical teams, while the Skorvath slowly calmed below her, its exhaustion finally overriding its rage. "Commander," Thex said urgently, "how do we proceed? This is unprecedented." Ral looked at Ambassador Kellic, who was smiling that particular smile that species learn to recognize when dealing with her people. The smile that meant calculations were being revised and predictions were being updated. "I told you," Kellic said, "humans are unusual." "This is not over," Ral insisted. "The Huntmaster will never accept this outcome. The challenge will be declared invalid. She will be required to face another opponent." "Perhaps," Kellic agreed, "though I wonder if you have asked yourself the correct question yet." "Which is?" "You have spent this entire hunt asking what a human can do against an apex predator," Kellic said, her eyes still on the screen showing Beatrice waiting calmly by the pit. "Perhaps you should be asking what an apex predator can do against a human who has decided to hunt it back." On the screens, medical teams were arriving, moving cautiously towards Beatrice. She stood, hands raised to show she was not a threat, and stepped aside to let them work. The Skorvath, seeing the familiar medical handlers, finally stopped struggling, and Beatrice Almeida, human from Sol 3, smiled that cold smile again. "Same time tomorrow, Commander?" she asked, looking directly at the camera. "I hear you have another 17 species of apex predators in this facility. I should hate to leave without meeting them all." The transmission ended. Ral sat down heavily in his command chair, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Somewhere on the observation deck, someone was laughing. It took him a moment to realize it was Ambassador Kellic. "Welcome," she said, still laughing, "to humanity." Part 2. The Huntmaster's chamber smelled of ozone and barely contained fury. Ral stood to attention, his mandibles clamped shut, while Huntmaster Zorgath paced behind his ceremonial desk like a caged predator. The massive Karani's forearms gestured violently as he spoke, each movement sharp enough to cleave the atmosphere. "Unacceptable," Zorgath snarled, his voice like grinding stone. 3,000 cycles of tradition, 3,000 cycles of proven dominance. And this soft-skinned mammal waltzes in and demands we change our protocols because she finds them distasteful. "With all due respect, Huntmaster," Ral began carefully, "she did defeat the Skorvath." She tricked it into a hole. Zorgath's fist slammed down, cracking the desk's surface. Where is the honor? Where is the true test of combat prowess? The rules specify only that the challenger must neutralize the opponent, Lieutenant Thex offered from his position near the door. They do not mandate a specific methodology. Zorgath's 4 eyes fixed on Thex with enough intensity to make the junior officer's stalks retract slightly. Do not quote regulations at me, Lieutenant. I wrote most of them. The spirit of the challenge is clear, even if this human found loopholes in the letter of the law. So what is your decision? Asked Ral. The huntmaster stopped pacing. His breathing slowed, control reasserting itself over rage. When he spoke again, his voice carried the cold calculation that had made him legendary across the Empire. We escalate. Ral felt his internal temperature drop several degrees. Huntmaster, if she wants to play games with our apex predators, then we will show her the difference between entertainment and extermination. Zorgath pulled up a holographic roster, scrolling through entries with one clawed hand. The Scorvath was Category 4. Dangerous, yes, but predictable. Single-minded, she exploited its lack of adaptability. You want to move her to Category 5? Thex sounded horrified. That is reserved for criminal executions. No, Zorgath said, his mandibles spreading in what might have been a smile. Category 6. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the environmental systems. There are only 3 Category 6 specimens in the entire facility, Ral said quietly, and we have never used them for official challenges. They are too unpredictable, too intelligent. Precisely. Zorgath selected an entry, and the hologram expanded to show a creature that made the Scorvath look tame by comparison. Meet Subject Theta, a void-born ravager from the outer rifts, capable of limited teleportation, can process 17 different sensory spectra simultaneously. It has killed 2 of its handlers and 3 maintenance crews. We have kept it sedated for the last 40 cycles, because standard containment protocols are insufficient. You cannot be serious, Ral whispered. I am entirely serious. Zorgath transferred the data to Ral's personal feed. Inform the human that her challenge has been upgraded owing to her exceptional performance. Make it sound like an honor. If she refuses, she forfeits all claims to victory and returns to her people in disgrace. And if she accepts? Then we finally get our proper hunt, Zorgath said, and I get to stop hearing about human exceptionalism from every diplomatic channel in the sector. Part 3. Beatrice Almeida stood in her assigned quarters, examining the formal challenge notification on her datapad whilst eating something the food synthesizers had approximated as a sandwich. The translation software struggled with some of the ceremonial language, but the core message was clear enough. Fight something worse or go home ashamed. Subtle, she muttered, taking another bite. A chime at the door announced a visitor. Beatrice checked the security feed, saw Ambassador Kellix waiting patiently, and opened the entrance. Ambassador, Beatrice greeted, gesturing to the room's single chair. Come to talk me out of this foolishness? Would it work? Kellix asked, settling into the furniture with practiced grace. Probably not. Then I am here to provide context. The ambassador produced her own datapad, sharing files to Beatrice's device. This is Subject Theta, everything we know about it, which admittedly is not enough. Beatrice scrolled through the information, her expression growing more focused with each entry. Teleportation is biological? How does that even work? We do not fully understand it. The void-born species evolved in an area of space with unusual dimensional properties. They can fold themselves through short distances, 3 meters maximum, but in combat, 3 meters might as well be 3 light years. 17 sensory spectra, Beatrice read aloud. So it can see me in infrared, ultraviolet, electromagnetic, gravitational, probably psionic residue. Can it see through walls? Uncertain, but assume yes. Beatrice put down her sandwich, her full attention now on the data. They are trying to kill me. Yes. Because I embarrassed them. Yes. By not killing something that did not need to die. Kellix tilted her head in acknowledgement. The Korani culture is built on dominance hierarchies maintained through displays of lethal force. You challenged not just their creature, but their entire philosophical framework. They cannot let that stand. So I can either fight this thing and probably die, or refuse and prove them right that humans are weak. Beatrice leaned back against the wall. That's a trap with no way out. There is always a third option. Which is? Kellix's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of emotion among her people. Survive the encounter and make them change their minds about what strength actually means. Beatrice laughed, though it was not a happy sound. No pressure, then. I have read extensively on human military history, Kellix said quietly. The Capitalha de Aljubarrota, the Pancherco de Diu, the defense of Estação Pedro Nunes during the First Contact Wars. Your species has a concerning habit of treating impossible situations as personal challenges. We call it stubbornness. Other species call it terrifying. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, studying the data on Subject Theta. Finally, she looked up at Kellix with that same cold smile from the arena. Tell the Huntmaster I accept, but I have one condition. I doubt he will accept conditions. He will accept this one, Beatrice said, because it makes for a better spectacle. I want full sensor access to Subject Theta's containment area for 6 hours before the challenge. I want to observe it, study it, understand what I'm dealing with. Kellix considered this. That is actually quite reasonable. It also gives them time to broadcast the upcoming event across every major network in the sector. The ratings will be extraordinary. And if I die, they get to show the galaxy what happens when humans get above their station, Beatrice finished. Yes, I understand the marketing angle, but if I am going to do this, I'm doing it properly. The ambassador stood, moving towards the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the human who was somehow both younger and older than her biological years suggested. Why did you come here, Beatrice Almeida? The challenge was voluntary. You could have stayed on your colony world, lived a peaceful life. Why walk into the arena? Beatrice picked up her sandwich again, examining it as if it held the answers. Because peaceful lives are built on the backs of people willing to stand in arenas. Because my little sister wants to be an explorer, and she should not have to hear aliens call her species weak. Because someone needed to show the galaxy that humans do not just survive. We adapt, we overcome, we win. And if you do not win this time, then at least I will make them work for it. Kellix left, and Beatrice returned to studying the data on Subject Theta. She had 6 hours to learn everything possible about a creature that had killed trained handlers and defied conventional containment protocols. She had faced worse odds, but not by much. Cha-cha. Part 4. The observation period began at Station Dawn. Beatrice stood in a reinforced viewing chamber overlooking Subject Theta's containment area, surrounded by monitoring equipment and flanked by 2 guards who looked as if they would rather be literally anywhere else. Subject Theta was not what she expected. The reports had described it as reptilian, which was technically accurate, but completely insufficient. The creature moved like liquid shadow, its form constantly shifting between solid and something less defined. Its skin was not scales, but something closer to articulated crystal, each facet reflecting light in patterns that hurt the eyes to look at directly. When it turned its head, Beatrice counted 14 eyes arranged in geometrically precise clusters. It knew she was watching. The creature oriented itself towards the observation window, and even through reinforced shielding, Beatrice felt the weight of its attention like a physical pressure. One of the guards made a strangled noise and stepped back. How long has it been awake? Beatrice asked, not looking away from Subject Theta. 3 hours, the guard replied, his translator giving his voice a nervous tremor. It is usually dormant during observation periods. Today it is active because it knows something is coming. Beatrice pulled out her datapad, making notes. It understands the routine. Observation periods precede combat events. It has pattern recognition. That is impossible, the second guard protested. It is a beast. Beasts do not kill handlers using different methods each time. Beasts do not test the containment fields in new locations every cycle. Beatrice pointed at the creature, which was now moving along the perimeter of its enclosure, one clawed appendage occasionally brushing against the energy barriers. That is not mindless aggression. That is systematic analysis. She spent the next 4 hours documenting everything. Movement patterns, response times, the frequency of its teleportation, the way its crystalline skin shifted color in different lighting, the subtle changes in its posture when it detected motion versus heat versus electromagnetic signatures. "It favors its left side," Beatrice muttered, making another note. "See how it turns? Right side turns are smooth. Left side turns have a fractional hesitation, an old injury perhaps, or developmental asymmetry." The guards exchanged glances but said nothing. As the observation period neared its end, Subject Theta did something unexpected. It stopped moving entirely, settling into a statue-like stillness in the exact center of its enclosure. All 14 eyes fixed on the observation window, on Beatrice. And then it made a sound, not a roar, not a growl, a complex series of tones and harmonics that made the monitoring equipment spike across multiple frequencies simultaneously. The translator attempted to process it, failed, tried again, and finally produced a single word on Beatrice's datapad. Recognized. Beatrice felt a block of ice form in her stomach. It just spoke. "Impossible," the first guard repeated. "The Voidborn do not have a language." "The Voidborn you have studied do not have a language," Beatrice corrected. "But this one just told me it recognizes what I am doing. It knows I am preparing to fight it, and it is preparing to fight me." She looked at the creature, and the creature looked back, and Beatrice understood with sudden clarity that this was not going to be at all like the Skorvath. This was not an ambush predator operating on instinct. This was something that thought, planned, and remembered. "Well," she said quietly, "at least it will be interesting." Part 5. The arena for the second challenge was different, larger, for one thing, with multiple levels and sections that could be sealed off or opened remotely. Lighting that could be adjusted across spectra. Environmental controls that could alter the temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition. The Huntmaster was not taking any chances. Beatrice entered through the main gate, her equipment checked and rechecked by nervous technicians who clearly expected to be cleaning her remains off the walls within minutes. She carried the same basic loadout as before, primitive by galactic standards, but with a few additions based on her observations. Commander Ral watched from the observation chamber, which was significantly more crowded than during the first challenge. Word had spread. Representatives from 40 species had arrived to watch the human either prove her worth or die trying. The betting pools were substantial, and the odds were not in Beatrice's favor. "Releasing Subject Theta," announced the arena controller. The opposite gate opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. For several seconds, nothing emerged. Then, reality seemed to fold incorrectly, and Subject Theta was simply there, 30 meters from Beatrice, its crystalline form reflecting the arena lights in dizzying patterns. Beatrice did not move, did not raise her weapon. She stood perfectly still and waited. Subject Theta tilted its head, the gesture eerily similar to what the Skorvath had done. Prey was supposed to run. That was the fundamental equation. But this prey was not running, just as she had not run before, and the creature's body language shifted to something that might have been curiosity. "What is she doing?" someone asked in the observation chamber. "The same thing she did last time," replied Ambassador Calix, "changing the rules." Beatrice raised her hand slowly, palm out, fingers spread, a universal gesture among dozens of species. "Stop. Wait. Acknowledge." Subject. Theta's eyes tracked the movement. Several of them rotated independently, scanning Beatrice across different spectra. The creature made that harmonic sound again, and this time, Beatrice was ready with a vocal synthesizer that had been hastily programmed based on the earlier recording. She made a sound back. It was clumsy, probably grammatically nonsensical if the creature actually had grammar, but it was an attempt at communication, and Subject Theta became completely still. "She is trying to talk to it," Ral said, disbelief saturating every syllable. "In the middle of a death match, she is trying to establish diplomatic contact." "Humans," Kellick said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. Beatrice made another sound, this one slightly different. The synthesizer was learning, adapting to feedback from the arena's acoustic sensors. Subject Theta responded with a more complex series of tones. The conversation, if it could be called that, lasted 90 seconds. 90 seconds of the most watched broadcast in the sector's history, during which a human and a void-born ravager attempted to exchange meaning while surrounded by weapons and death. Then, Subject Theta moved, not to attack. It teleported sideways 3 meters, positioning itself at an angle where Beatrice could see it more clearly without the harsh backlighting. A gesture of accommodation. Beatrice responded by holstering her projectile launcher and sitting down on the arena floor, cross-legged, her hands visible and empty. "No," Raoul breathed. "No, she cannot be serious." But Beatrice was entirely serious. She sat in the center of a combat arena designed for lethal encounters and treated it like a negotiating table. Subject Theta watched for another moment, then folded its limbs in a configuration that lowered its center of mass, not quite sitting, but not standing ready to pounce either. They remained that way for 5 minutes, then 10. The observation chamber filled with confused murmuring. The betting pools were in chaos. No one had predicted this outcome because this outcome was not supposed to be possible. Finally, Beatrice stood up slowly. Subject Theta rose with her, mirroring the gesture. She walked towards the creature, each step deliberate and clear. Subject Theta did not retreat. When she was 5 meters away, close enough that a teleport-assisted attack would be impossible to evade, Beatrice stopped. Reaching into her pack, she pulled out something small, an energy bar from her supplies. She broke it in half, ate one piece, and held out the other. Subject Theta's eyes focused on the offered food. Multiple appendages twitched, calculating trajectories and threat assessments. Then one crystalline claw extended, delicately took the energy bar, and brought it to what might have been a mouth. "She just fed it," someone said in the observation chamber. "She fed the Category 6 specimen that killed 3 maintenance crews." "Yes," Kellick said, "and it ate from her hand, which means that everything we thought we knew about the Voidborn was incomplete." Beatrice and Subject Theta stood together for another minute. Then, Beatrice did something that would be replayed in xenoanthropology classes for generations. She reached out and touched the creature's crystalline skin. Subject Theta flinched but did not attack, did not teleport away. It allowed the contact. And when Beatrice pulled her hand back, she was smiling. Not the cold smile from before, but a genuine expression of triumph. She turned to face the observation cameras. "This creature is not a mindless predator," she called out, her voice amplified by every speaker in the facility. "It is intelligent, it is aware, it is capable of communication and reciprocal behavior. You have been torturing a sentient being for entertainment." The silence in the observation chamber was absolute. "That is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence," Huntmaster Zorgath's voice boomed across the arena speakers. "How can you possibly prove such a thing in a few minutes of interaction?" "Because it is standing here listening to us instead of killing me," Beatrice replied. "Because when I attempted communication, it responded with patterns, not random noise. Because it made a tactical decision to accommodate my positioning request. Because it accepted food from a potential threat, which requires trust. Because right now, it is waiting to see what happens next." She turned back to Subject Theta. "You understand me, don't you? Perhaps not every word, but the intent, the meaning." Subject Theta made a sound, a single clear tone that the translators managed to parse. Affirmative. The observation chamber exploded into chaos. Beatrice walked back to Subject Theta, standing beside the creature as if they were allies rather than opponents. "I came here to prove humans are not weak. I have done that. But in the process, I also proved something else. Strength is not just about who can kill whom. It is about who can choose not to kill, who can recognize intelligence in unfamiliar forms, who can turn a battle into a conversation." She looked directly at the camera, at Raoul, at Zorgath, at every species representative watching. "I win this challenge not by defeating Subject Theta, but by refusing to see it as an enemy in the first place. And if you cannot accept that, then your entire system is built on a violence you are too afraid to question." Huntmaster Zorgath appeared on the arena screens, his massive form radiating barely controlled rage. "You have proven nothing except your capacity for disruption. The challenge is void. You will face another opponent or forfeit." "No," came a different voice. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Kellick standing, her scales bright with formal authority. The challenge is valid, and the human has won. Moreover, she has exposed a catastrophic failure in your containment and analysis protocols. If Subject Theta is sentient, and the evidence strongly suggests it is, then this facility has been in violation of 17 interstellar treaties regarding the treatment of intelligent beings. That is a diplomatic interpretation, Zorgath snarled. That is a legal fact, Kellex countered, and I'm formally requesting that the Zinthari Collective investigate this facility for potential war crimes. I suspect we will find other specimens that have been misclassified as animals when in fact they are people. The power dynamic in the room shifted violently. War crime investigations meant sanctions. Sanctions meant economic collapse. Economic collapse meant the end of the Qurani's carefully maintained dominance. Zorgath's forearms clenched into fists. This is not over. Yes, Kellex said quietly. It is. The galaxy is watching. They saw a human show more wisdom and compassion than your entire organization. They saw her turn certain death into peaceful contact. You can double down on violence or you can adapt. The choice is yours. In the arena, Beatrice remained beside Subject Theta, one hand resting on its crystalline skin. The creature had not moved, seemingly understanding that the real battle was happening in words and politics rather than in claws and blood. Ral approached Huntmaster Zorgath carefully. Commander, permission to speak? Denied. With respect, sir, I'm speaking anyway. Ral opened his own data feed. Ambassador Kellex is correct. If we fight this, we lose everything. If we accept it, we can pivot, claim the human-revealed flaws in our system that we are now correcting. Frame, it is progress rather than defeat. You want me to reward her insubordination? I want you to survive the next fiscal quarter, Ral said bluntly, because if the Zinthari Collective pulls its trade agreements, we are finished. Zorgath was silent for a long, terrible moment. Then his shoulders sagged fractionally. Open a communications channel to the arena. The speakers crackled to life. Beatrice Almeida of Sol 3. Beatrice looked up at the cameras, still standing beside Subject Theta. Yes? You are declared victor of the challenge. Both challenges. Your performance has been educational. Thank you, said Beatrice. And Subject Theta? Another pause. Subject Theta will be transferred to Zinthari custody for proper evaluation and, if warranted, reclassification as a protected sentient being. Subject Theta made a sound that might have been one of relief. Beatrice smiled, and this time it was warm and genuine. That is all I wanted to hear. She left the arena walking beside Subject Theta, the two of them moving together like old friends. The image was broadcast across 40 systems, and by the time Beatrice returned to her quarters, she had received interview requests from 300 media organizations and job offers from 24 diplomatic corps. Ambassador Kellex found her that evening, staring out of the window at the stars beyond Magoa Prime. You broke their entire hunting tradition in 2 days, Kellex observed. That is impressively efficient. I just showed them what they were refusing to see, Beatrice replied. Everything else was already broken. I just made the cracks visible. What will you do now? Beatrice considered the question. Go home, I suppose. Tell my sister she can explore any star she wants because humans are not prey. We are not predators. We are the ones who stop the hunt and ask if there is a better way. That philosophy will not make you popular everywhere. Probably not, Beatrice agreed. But it will make us right. And in the long run, being right matters more than being liked. Kellex studied the human for a long moment. Do you know what terrifies other species about humanity? It is not your persistence. Your optimism, Kellex corrected. You walk into arenas designed to kill you and come out having made friends with the monsters. You see violence and choose conversation. You find enemies and turn them into allies. That is not just unusual, that is revolutionary. Beatrice laughed. We prefer to think of it as common sense. Common sense is rarely common, Kellex said, and it almost never makes history, but you did both. She left Beatrice alone with her thoughts and the stars. Somewhere in the facility, Subject Theta was being prepared for transfer to a proper xenological evaluation. Somewhere else, the Huntmaster was rewriting protocols and figuring out how to explain decades of potential misconduct. and across the sector, species that had dismissed humans as irrelevant were quietly revising their assessments. Beatrice Almeida, human from Sol 3, closed her eyes and smiled. The alpha beast had chosen its prey. The human had smiled back and said, "Let's see who hunts whom." As it turned out, nobody had to hunt anyone at all. Sometimes, that was the most powerful victory possible.